Hello, my name is Nathan, and I'll be your media guide. Today we're going to take a look at a project I've been working on for LS560 at the University of Alabama. I wanted to create a streaming media server. I've managed to do that, but I have hit a few issues along the way. So first, let me take you through the process that I used to create this server, and then we'll discuss some of the issues I've run into and where I'm going to go from here. Planning this project was a very ad hoc process. I was excited about setting up a media server and discussing the prospects with a friend who works in IT. He liked some of the ideas I had enough to donate an old project computer to just let me have fun with. I knew I'd be experimenting with an OS, I knew I would be experimenting with software, and that there was a very distinct possibility I might end up breaking the computer I worked with. He said that was okay, so I was a little free to be adventurous. From there I found it useful to engage in a thought exercise, to keep myself moving in a forward direction, set some real constraints on the project, and also keep from following any white rabbits of interesting items that might come up in the course of my explorations. I considered that I might be a librarian trying to create a streaming media server, whether it's for a digital exhibition, to make a digital media library available to the public, or just to make more stations for access available without having to necessarily increase the amount of local storage on each machine. Fitting within those constraints, you can see that Windows is rather expensive, and I also frankly really wanted to learn how to use Linux. So I turned to a distro called Ubuntu that I'd seen some pretty good reviews about, and got it rolling after a couple of hours of trying to create a boot disk. In that same sort of vein, when you look for media server software, you get a lot of hits, and I checked out Plex because it was one that I'd heard of before. It turns out it does a lot of the stuff I want to do right out of the box, and while there are some subscription models, you can get it to do most of the things you'd want it to for free. Some of the constraints that I came up with were that I needed to be as low budget as possible, so that meant avoiding as many expenditures or subscriptions as I could, and that I also wanted to focus on using open source software. This way I could keep to my small budget while also avoiding any of the kind of entanglements that come with proprietary software user agreements. I also wanted to use a software that would keep the media streaming on the local network and not venture out to streaming across the World Wide Web to avoid pushing the boundaries on fair use of any of the media. I turned to Kodi, a software that I had also seen with good reviews online, which met all of these requirements and also had a lot of customizability, so I could stick to just streaming my media on the local network if I wanted to, but I had the options later on for add-ins from other kinds of software if I wanted to branch out on the media that I could support. That covers most of the major decisions I had to make for this project, so I'll move on to some of the problems that I encountered. I already mentioned that the boot disk took me forever to create. It was largely because I didn't know that much about it. I've done one for Windows before, but never for something like this. So I basically took the trial and error approach, and got it to work eventually. Once I got the OS installed, I found that it actually has a pretty solid GUI. It's got a little app store of sorts where a lot of the software is free, but it's pretty straightforward to download. But there's still plenty of software that you have to resort to the command line to install or keep up to date. I ended up having to do a little bit of research on like Debian distributions, version management, and managed repositories, which made my head hurt a little bit, but this actually ended up being one of my favorite parts of the project, both because it was difficult and I wasn't really sure I was going to be able to understand it well enough to do it, and also because it's just kind of neat. The most significant problem that I encountered involved streaming media from one device to another. I managed to get video to play just fine using Kodi as a video player on the server machine, but when I pulled it up using a client machine, in this case running Kodi on Windows, it ended up being a pretty slow video stream, and I've got a couple of theories as to why. My first theory is that my home network just simply isn't configured to support streaming of this magnitude. My second theory is that it's a slowdown on the OS, but I'm not sure if it's on the server side or the client side yet. That leads me into discussing where I want to take this project from here. Obviously, I want to do something about the network issues, just to make sure that's not what's slowing the media down. I've also become acquainted more recently with this idea of network-attached storage. There are at least a few people who've used this kind of idea for their media servers, so I might be able to get a little community support with that one. Kodi also has a function to use MySQL as a software to manage the library database of media that Kodi uses. From what I understand, this sort of outsources Kodi's indexing of its media library, speeding up a lot of its processes. In the case that some of my streaming woes are because of an aggregate of issues, I'm going to give this a shot. One, because I've never used MySQL, and two, because I figure that every bit's going to help. In conclusion, though I was able to get the media server up and running, I've still got a little ways to go before it's practical for use. Working on this project though, I've learned a lot. On the Linux side of things, I've learned how to create an install disk and install Linux on a PC, as well as how to install and update software using the Linux command line and Debian advanced package tools. Though I'm frustrated by the fact that the stream is so slow as to be unusable, I'm determined to get this media server to work. Thanks for joining me today. If you've got any advice or comments, please drop me a line below, and I'll see you next time.